Hi, guys, and welcome to a brand new episode of Sipping Tea with Suzanne. I am your fabulous host, Suzanne, and I have with me in the studio none other than Cyrille Vincent. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, Suzanne. How are you?
I am fantastic. Well, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunities. I really appreciate being here and sharing my story and what I'm working on. By the way, it's a very wonderful and beautiful place. Nice tea. Yeah, it's really nice to be
All
here.
right. Well, thank you so much. All right. So, we are going to dive right in and chat with our guest today. But first, I wanted to say thank you to my loyal viewers and subscribers. Appreciate you guys tuning in week after week for each episode. I appreciate every subscription, every comment, every feedback. Thank you so much. I want to say thank you to Paul Anderson, my producer, my cameraman, and to Paul Anderson Photographer for being a sponsor. Now, if you're interested in being a guest, interested in recommending a guest, or interested in being a sponsor, please connect with me at Suzanne at positivelysuzanne.com. So listen, y'all, it is Black History Month, and I promise you this month I'm going to be highlighting Black excellence all month long. And that's why I'm so excited to have with me in the studio Cyrille Vincent. He describes himself as a storyteller. And what a story he has to tell, because what he's currently working on is so fascinating and is such an integral part of our history, Black history, American history. He is, well, I'm gonna let him tell you about it. So, welcome, Cyril.
Thank you very much. Again, I'm happy to be here and thank for the opportunity to share about this very important story. So let me just start by introducing myself. My name is Cyrille Vincent. Um, I'm originally from the African Central region. The country is called Central African Republic. I started really getting involved with storytelling long time when I was in high school. And back then I was just writing poetry and novels, and of course none of that got published, but it introduced me to the world of storytelling. Fast forward, I started working in the music industry with music producer and video producer, and that's how I fell in love with the medium of film, videos, and I found out that it was an extremely powerful medium. I got interested in it, started producing myself, and I noticed that I was really interested in telling stories. So I decided to venture into documentary filmmaking. I came to United States in 2016. And since then, I've been living here in Worcester. I spent a little time homeless in New York, but then by the grace of God, I was able to find some connections in Worcester where I have been living since then. And that's how I started working on a bunch of other projects, short films. My first feature film was on Woodstock, 1969. That happened in New York. And when I was working on that project, because there's a lot of research that are involved in the process of creating these films, I went to the Worcester Public Library to get some books about the project I was working on. And that day, somehow, I noticed the statue of Major Taylor outside of the library. Mind you, I've been to the library many times before, but I never really pay attention. And even before that, there's a Major Taylor Boulevard downtown Worcester, and I live like 3 minutes away from that boulevard. I drove through that boulevard hundreds of times. And because there weren't any sign, there weren't any picture or any poster, I could not put one and one together at that point. My GPS reminded me all the time that I drove there, that this is the Major Taylor Boulevard. But I never pay attention because I thought it was related to some military veteran or anything, but really it never caught my attention until that specific day that I went to the library and I found the statue of Major Taylor out there. And I was like, oh, so this statue is actually referring to the Major Taylor Boulevard that I drive every day through. Long story short, again, that's how little by little I got acquainted to the story. And I went to look in the story and I was like, how is it possible that, there's such an incredible story like this that I have not? And at this time, we are around 2020,
Yeah.
in the mid of 2020, when COVID also is having a lot of damage out there. So I questioned myself because I made my own research. I found out about the story. And as a filmmaker, storyteller, filmmaker, using film as a medium, I went to look for a movie or something on Major Taylor, and I did not find anything that was satisfactory for me, you know. And I said, I'm going to do something about this story. It's a local story. And it's an international story because Major Taylor did travel the world to compete against some of the greatest cyclists of the time. So I just got so passionate about the story with time, and I decided to make a documentary about it.
Yeah, no, well, it's on your shirt, Whirlwind, right? But I think I would say that it was predestined because you came to Worcester where he lived, for a while. I mean, he wasn't born here, he was born in Indianapolis, and moved here and became, as you mentioned, this international star, right? So, but I think sometimes people's stories are told by the victors, right? And, Major Taylor, he wrote a book, his autobiography, but you said you did some research and there wasn't any satisfactory story about him because it's like, whoever is in charge or whatever had, decided that like, we're not telling his story yet, or we're not telling his stories. Although I will say that terrifies me a little because I'm thinking of how many fascinating stories of people from our history that are not being told because they don't have a Cyrille Vincent who's going to come across it and, tell it. So I do live in Worcester. There's the Major Taylor Boulevard. There is the fantastic Major Taylor statue right in front of the library, and there's some details under it. So I think that has actually educated a lot of people, that statue, because it's a beautiful portrait. Actually, I went when they did the Major Taylor Boulevard. I think it was like in 2006. I actually went to that ceremony. I was living in Worcester at that. I've been here a while. But how did you come up with Whirlwind, or did you come up with Whirlwind?
Well, that's a good question. So initially, I wanted to call the project Worcester Whirlwind, and because that was his nickname. I mean, Major Taylor had a lot of nickname in the press. They would call him sometimes the Black Cyclone, the Comet, the Ebony Strike. Worcester Whirlwind was one of the nicknames that the press kind of coined him, especially the Telegram and Gazette. At that time in the 1800s, you will believe that the Telegram been around for a long time like that. But anyway, it was one of his nicknames, the Worcester Whirlwind. So that's what I thought I would call the project initially. But when I was talking to people, I realized that people were having a hard time, especially the ones that are not from Worcester, to say Worcester. So I would spend like half an hour trying to teach them how to say Worcester. And I was like, I don't want to spend time, I want to talk about a story. I don't want to spend time teaching people how to say Worcester, So I kind of cut it short at some points. And somebody also that I met later told me, hey, listen, let's just call this Whirlwind because, and I thought it was a good idea. So we cut it short to Whirlwind. And that's what we've been using as a title since then. But really, it's from his nickname that he got from the press.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I think you made the right decision. What's the Whirlwind? Because you're right. Like, you will take up a lot of time.
And then, it's long, too.
It is. Not only that, and then folks will be trying to spell it.
Yeah.
And then that's a whole nother half an hour to do that. So as a storyteller, what story it is that you're hoping to tell for Major Taylor? What story are you telling?
Well, for me, really, I think his character, because he was an incredible athlete, incredibly disciplined. When you look at his regimen and his training regimen specifically, and you look at, how his diet was built back then, that's more than 100 years from now, he was really ahead of the time in terms of, training regimen, his diet. So as an athlete, he was great. But really what made me so passionate and still make me so passionate about this story is the character of the man. His sportsmanship was exceptional. This is a gentleman that was good as an athlete and could compete against most of the greatest of the time. But because racism was going on, Jim Crow, and mind you, just for context, historian agrees that this period of time, the early 1800 to the late, 1900, it's pretty much coined as the nadir of race relationship in America, which means this is the time when it was very bad to be a black person. Lynching, not bad as the sense like God created us bad, but the laws of the country, segregation and all that, weren't allowing black people to express the ingenuity, the talent. And so Major Taylor is trying to show that he's capable of doing all these things that other white writers are doing. But on top of that, he had to deal with racism. He had to deal with outright violence, where other writers would even, choke him out front on the track, or they would team together to pocket him so that he doesn't win. Receiving threat when he was on the road. So really, what made me so passionate about the story is how he responded to all that. He would speak, when he felt like he wasn't treated fairly, he would speak. And you can even read that in his autobiography. But never he wanted to use injustice, or how can I say that? In many situations where he was treated unjustly, he wouldn't want to get an even break that way. And I mean by, sometimes you will see some athlete when they get treated badly by another athlete on the court, so they were trying to get it even. Like, if you punch me, I punch you. If you hurt me, I will hurt you too, and things like that. Major Taylor wasn't that kind of person. He would let things go because I guess he was focused on the big picture. But also, I guess he realized that if he got feisty, if he was to try to fight, people will use that as an excuse to be like, hey, we told you that Negro is not worthy of any time, because look at what he's doing. He's fighting. So anyway, he understood what was his mission, and he did not answer to hate with hate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I admire that about him so much because, nowhere in his story, when I've read about him of any article that I've come across, it said that he was angry. And I think, you talked about him being, his regiment, his sportsmanship, like everything that I've read about him talks about his determination, his perseverance, his dedication. So he truly loved the sport, right? And there were writers that didn't want to, because he was competing at the time. He was the only African American, and he was competing at the time against white men, and they did not want that. They were upset. You're right. They did attack him. They did. There was just, even when he won, his victory was very, very lonely because nobody was celebrating him. He was breaking records, and nobody was celebrating him. So I admire, him. And I love that, you said you got more passionate the more you learned about him, because the more I had learned about him over the years, I was like, this man, like, if I went through what he went through, I don't know if I would have persevered the same way. And, similar to Martin Luther King, it's just like, you can't always respond hate with hate, because it's like, at that time, I think they were looking for any excuse to kick him out of the sport, right? Any excuse to, because here is this man that at the time, during the Civil War era, we weren't even thought of as human beings. So here is this man who you don't even think is worthy to shine your shoes, but he's out there breaking records and making folks look bad, right?
Yeah.
So anything, you look at somebody sideways, would be an opportunity for them to say, we told you that he doesn't deserve to be here. But no, he persevered. I always found it funny that he ended up in Worcester. I mean, I know it was because of his employer coming here, but you know how Worcester is well known.
Yeah, in his story, Worcester has a pretty significant place, and it's important because around 1895, under the advice of his mentor, buddy Louis Munger, who was a retired high wheeler cyclist, you know, back before we have the safety bicycle that we ride
Yeah.
today, which is like the two wheels that is more common today, they were high wheelers, which was like the other people call that penny farthing, whatever, but it's like a big wheel in the front. I don't know, you probably will see, you're not going to see a lot of people riding that
Not
anymore.
right now, no.
But it was like big wheels on the front, and that kind of bicycle created a lot of problem for many people. Buddy Munger was a retired high wheeler cyclist. So he saw in Major Taylor something great, and he told Major Taylor that, you know, I think you have you have the bill. You can be a champion. And I want to mention that at that time also, the League of American Wheelmen, which was like the governing body of track cycling in the country, had a ban. They actually came together and banned, and it was a law, you know, that black cyclists cannot compete on any pro track cycling. Major Taylor somehow got involved with a ride in a race in Indiana, and he won the race, and the promoter weren't happy, the rider weren't happy, and they also banned him out in Indiana. So his mentor at that point, Buddy Munger, thought that if they came to Worcester, they will have a much more tolerant environment, you know, because there was that the North and the South thing, you know, after the Civil War. You would think that even when slavery was banned, you know, people would follow, but there was still a lot of things not going well in the South. And so for Buddy Munger, moving up north was a way of, you know, finding business, because I want to mention that Buddy was also a businessman. He had a manufacturing company, the Munger Manufacturing Company, where he would build bicycle, and he actually at some point built a bicycle for Major Taylor. Anyway, they move out here around 1895. You know, and Major Taylor is very grateful for that, because back in Indiana, he could not train in a YMCA, you know, because again, he was black. But out here in Worcester, he was able to access the YMCA. But it wasn't perfect though, because you know, even the press around town was still calling him sometime some kind of name. And as you mentioned, when he will win, instead of playing the national anthem that they would play for White Rider, they would play like, you know, a diminishing and ridicule songs, you know, like Dixies and the Plucky. I don't even want to repeat those words, but the band, you know, when somebody won a race, technically they should have a celebration when they are taking the lap of victory. And, you know, most white rider would do that lap of victory on the national anthem or whatever. But Major Taylor no one wanted to sing the national anthem for Major Taylor. Fast forward, when he tried to buy a house, he bought a house actually in the Columbus Park area on Upson Avenue. He went through an agent to buy the house, and when the neighbor realized that, hey, this is a black man, back then that area was known to be pretty much a white area. People got upset. White people got upset in Worcester that, hey, we don't want to have, you know, a black person around. Although he was famous, he was known for what he could do on the track, he still had some resistance in Worcester, you know, because sometimes as a documentary filmmaker, I don't want to tell the story half. Like,
Yeah,
you
no,
know,
absolutely.
because sometimes yes, Worcester gave him a new lease on life, but it wasn't perfect.
It wasn't.
And I don't even think that anywhere in the world would have been perfect anyway, consider the culture of the time. So anyway, he moves out here. His life is a little better than what he got in Indiana. He can at least raise. He's close to New York, where there was the Madison Square Garden, and there was a big race in the Madison Square Garden. It was called the 6-day race,
Yes.
and it would happen pretty much every year. It was kind of the biggest one, but that race was known to be very difficult and cruel. As you can hear, the 6-day race means you race around the velodrome in the Madison Square Garden for 6 days.
Yeah.
If you stop, you can stop if you want to, but the person that will ride more mile during those 6 days, the person that will win. So that's pretty much where Mr. Taylor started as a professional. After Birdie Munger and some rider were able to get him a license, because at some point, the board of director of the League of American Wheelmen realized that Mr. Taylor bring crowd. When people heard about Major Taylor, they would want to go see the race. And if the crowd come, the money will come too, because they will charge ticket. So promoter agreed that, okay, we have a ban that is going on black cyclists, but we can allow Major Taylor because he's very good. But he has to show us that he's that good by competing in the 6-day race. So that's how he ended up in that race. He end up riding 1,700 mile plus. And, during that time, he had a hard time riding that race because he started even hallucinating on the track. And he thought somebody was chasing him on the track with a knife or whatever. And this was a very difficult place to start because this is really his first race as a professional after he got his professional license. So
That was a tough race. I mean, it did give him more visibility. More
It
people
did.
knew about him,
Yeah.
and I think he may have earned just a smidgen of respect for people who saw him less than, because to even compete in that race and to get placed in that race was difficult for any cyclist and for a black cyclist at the time. As I mentioned, one of the things every time you read an article about it, it talked about is perseverance. Just because, I think about even in our time right now, like racism still exists, and we face it, and we get upset. And I think the thing is like now we have a platform, right? We have social media. We can call our congressman. We can do a lot of things. It wasn't change it, but it will bring visibility. But in that time, it was so blatant. Everybody was doing it. They refused to play the national anthem. The people that were in charge were like, no, you can't compete, things like that. And he was married. He was married at the time. So I don't know much about his spouse, but, I really hope that he had her to talk to, because what he was doing, and having that standard of excellence, because most genius, it's lonely. It's lonely being a genius than a black genius doing the civil rights era. It can be lonely. So I really hope that, his partner, his wife, was somebody that he was able to just talk to about, just to unload with that toll of just going out every day and putting on a brave face just to do something that you are good at.
Yeah, it is believed that he met his wife out here in Worcester.
Yes.
The mom was black and the dad was white. That's his wife, parent. And it is believed he met his wife at a church service around late 1899, early 1900. He got married with his wife in 1902 in Connecticut, in Ansonia, Connecticut. His wife was named Daisy Victoria Morris. All I can say about the conversations with his wife that I do know is based on the artifact and the archive that we have access to. And you can, when Major Taylor was on the road, he would write to his wife constantly. He would send postcards of all the town or city he was riding in, including when he was abroad. And you can tell that he did love his wife. But something that comes across is he never dwelled on the injustice and the racism. And I guess maybe he did not want his wife to worry about him. But I don't remember an instance where he's talking about him being treated unfairly, right? If although the press would talk about it,
Yeah.
but I don't remember any letter where he actually mentioned it. And before even his wife, he had a friend in Worcester that was called Benjamin Walker. In early 2020, a lady was cleaning her basement and she found some letters of Major Taylor that he sent to his friend that he was living with before he met his wife. And his friend was called Benjamin Walker. And this is also a time where Major Taylor is going through violence, racism and all that. And when you read the letter, he doesn't even mention anything about the injustice he's going through again. So I can't tell about personal conversation they were having when they were at home or whatever. But based on the letters and the postcard and the diary and the scrapbooks that Major Taylor kept, he don't talk a lot about what he's going through. He's more talking about weather, his win, and things that good news, I guess, more than anything else.
Yeah.
Which I found.
Incredible.
I still don't even know how to interpret that still yet, because if it was me, for example, when you are going through a lot of challenge, all you want to talk about is those challenge. So I don't understand how he was able to set that aside and just focus on the good stuff.
Wow. Yeah. I listen, I found that incredible because when I was doing research and, when I was finding, like, every time I read an article about him, like I said, you just find out the bare minimums about the wife, I know, I love that, like, Connecticut was mentioned, Worcester, and I'm like, yay, I know Connecticut, and, all of that. But yeah, you're right. I haven't seen anything that he complained, about the treatment that he received. So you mentioned that he had met his wife in church, and I remember that his faith was important to him, because one of the things that had kept him from racing all over Europe was because he didn't want to race on Sundays.
Yeah.
So, but then he went to Europe, and then he started racing, then he started winning. So, I guess it was a little better. The treatment in Europe was a little better, but it was still...
Yeah. Before he went to Europe, actually, when he won the World Championship in Montreal, Canada in 1899, that's August 1899, this is a sprint, 1 mile sprint championship. That's pretty much the greatest honor you can get, or the greatest competition in track cycling. He wins. After 1899, Major Taylor became quite a celebrity because people around the world hear about the news of this black man that is actually beating the best white riders in the world. And at that point, I want to mention that France, Europe and France particularly, was the center of cycling, pretty much. Cycling was big. Like, it was big in the United States, but it was really big in France.
Yeah.
And it's still, to some extent, when you hear the Tour de France and Paris-Roubaix, cycling is still something that is big out there. But anyway, after 1899, when he won the World Championship in Canada, he becomes a world celebrity, much more than media talk about him, much more than what happened at the Madison Square Garden in 1896 with the 6-day race. So media in Europe and France particularly start speculating, is this black man going to come to Europe? But because most races were scheduled on Sunday, Major Taylor did not want to ride on Sunday. So they have to, in 1900, they sent a gentleman out from France, a promoter, to come and convince Major Taylor to go to France. Major Taylor wasn't, they actually met in Boston, and Major Taylor did not agree with the deal. And back then, the deal they gave him was $10,000 for appearance fee, just to show up. And, if he win the race, he get the price of the race. And which a lot of riders were upset about that. Like, why do that black man get appearance fee? Other people would not get appearance fee. You win. If you win a race, what you get is the price of the race. So Mr. Taylor was pretty much the only one that was offered an appearance fee, which means if we win or no, he had the money.
He has money.
So,
Yeah.
and a lot of white riders were upset about that. But anyway, they send out a gentleman that comes down. He talks to Mr. Taylor, and Mr. Taylor is like, I'm not doing a ride on Sunday. You know, it doesn't matter how much money you're going to get me. If you move the race on a different day, I would do it. But if it's on Sunday, and that gentleman, you know, the deal breaks because they don't get to an agreement. And Mr. Taylor, he goes back to France. He tells people, hey, I met this man. He's well-mannered. He's really stick with his religious scruple. I mean, he's very faithful. He's not going to do this. So later in that year, later in 1900, they sent another gentleman. At that point, he was a journalist. He was also a promoter. His name was Coquel, Robert Coquel. He comes down with the same deal that gentleman came before, but Mr. Taylor said no to that. Anyway, long story short, they end up agreeing that, okay, we're going to give you $8,000, not $10,000 anymore, because you don't want to race on Sunday. We're going to get it down to $8,000, and we're going to you're not going to race on Sunday. So they strike the deal, and Mr. Taylor get ready to go to France, you know, and he get there. His first race was in Berlin, Germany, but the biggest race at that time that everybody was waiting for was against Edmond Jacquelin, which was the French national champion.
At the time, yeah.
Yeah, at the time. And, you know, rewinding, Edmond could not compete in Canada, you know, in 1899 for whatever reason. And the World Championship in 1900 that happened in France, Mr. Taylor could not compete there because he did not want to race on Sunday. So everybody was kind of expecting that the World Championship of 1901 will give the opportunity to the French champion, and Mr. Taylor, who have not got the opportunity to compete before, to meet, and which is what happened. The media would talk about it. Major Taylor get there. The first race he lose because he said it was very cold, but he asked for a rematch and he win that. He did at least 30 other races around at the same time in all over Europe, and he won most of them. He did lose a few of them, but he won most of them. So at this point, really, when he beat Edmond Jacquelin, he set the record straight that he is a world champion. He is an international superstar. And as you said, it was better. He was treated a little better in Europe than he was treated here in America. You know, he would be taken to nice places. People with, other promoter would take him around in their cars or whatever. So he had a superstar treatment. But still, racism was not, they weren't as violent as they were here, although we learned later that, you know, they still had some ramification of racism, like even Edmond Jacquelin. When Edmond Jacquelin won the first race, he thumped Major Taylor on the nose, like he did a gesture. And Major Taylor was so upset about it that he promised himself that he was going to beat him on a rematch. So at that time, yes, Europe is a little less racist.
It's a little better, yeah, but
there are still, you know, some people wanted to see him. I don't even want to get into those details, but anyway, he still called names. Like they would call him the Flying Negro. When you read article in the press, they would still call him names that are related to his dark skin, to kind of show that, hey, this is a black man, although his life was not on the line as it was in America, because here it was difficult for him. You know, he would ride and people would, one time in Taunton, Massachusetts, one rider, after the ride, Mr. Taylor won that race, after the rider came behind him and choked him out. Mr. Taylor, just because Mr. Taylor won. And it's known that the police has to intervene. Mr. Taylor was unconscious for about 15 minutes. And you know, it was very sad for him to compete out here. But in the midst of that, though, again, it's come back to his character and why I'm so passionate about this story. In the midst of that, Major Taylor was still considering himself as a proud American. And I want to mention that Major Taylor was not the only black cyclist at the time. There were other black cyclists, but they had to settle someplace else, like in Canada or in Europe, because it was a little easier for them to do that. And they would wonder why Major Taylor would still stay in America. And when he would travel abroad, like in France, he would meet other American cyclists, black cyclists that were living out there, and he would try to convince them to come back to United States. And nobody could understand why. You know, like, you are going through all of this. You have the opportunity to establish yourself in a country that will treat you a little better. Why don't you take that opportunity? Why do you look at yourself as still a proud American? But that's what he did choose.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. I mean, we'll never know. I mean, it's his home, right?
Yeah.
He kept thinking, I'm probably thinking, I hope this changes. This is my home. I don't want to go anywhere else. Like, why should I have to leave my home and do something else? And this might change. Now, is the film going to look at any part towards the end of his life, or you're more focusing on his racing years?
Well, again, when you are making a project like this, at least from my understanding and in my opinion, you have to try to tell the whole story. You can't only focus on the good stuff, because when you learn more about the story, you learn that Mr. Taylor died poor. Although he was one of the richest guy in the country, he made a few bad investments after he retired in 1910, and he was estranged from his wife and daughter. He actually died in Chicago. He tried to sell his book out of his car and things like that. He trying to get back to college out here in Worcester, but they would not admit him again because of his skin color. I would talk. We plan on talking about the end of his life, but we're not going to dwell on it. We're not going to dwell on it because I believe personally that although he did die poor and he actually got buried in an unmarked grave, until later on people came together with the support of a bicycle company to exhume his body and put it in a better place that, as a champion he deserved. The end of his life is a little sad, and I guess that's why Hollywood probably did not do any movie about this, because usually they like when the story ends well, happy ending,
happily ever after, the fairy tale, right?
Happy ending.
You know what? I still think he had a happy ending. I mean, I know, like, towards the end of his life, as you said, end up in Chicago, end up making bad investments, loses his money, being estranged from his family. I think probably everything was catching up to him, at the time, that strength that he had to display for so long. And this is just my personal opinion, that the strength that he had to display for so long was just finally, he was exhausted. He was exhausted.
He was.
So I think, his happy ending was, although he was buried in an unmarked grave, years later, folks recognized that, his contribution to the sport and, his character, and he was, exhumed and put to something that was more befitting his status. So I think that's great. And then he was also posthumously inducted, as one of the world's greatest cyclists. And, sadly, for a lot of black folks, at the time, they couldn't be the full of who they wanted to be. So it's after their death that they recognized, Martin Luther King was 39 years old when he died. And now, he would have been 99. And now, every year, his birthday is celebrated. I mean, he was a great man. But in his time, he wasn't as recognized. So I think it's the same thing with Major Taylor. Now we have Major Taylor Boulevard. We have Major Taylor at the library. We have the Major Taylor Museum. And there's other places that Major Taylor things are popping up. So, just unfortunately, because he was born a black man, he wasn't as recognized as he should be. But I don't think he would have changed that. I think that he was okay with being born a black man. If he was born white, he would be all over the Right?
Yeah.
He would be, but it's okay though. Like, I'm glad he's one of our heroes. I'm glad he's somebody that my kids could learn about. I'm glad it's somebody that I could learn about, so that when, things are hard,
Yeah.
like when somebody looks at me funny, I can think back on people like that, like to just what they endured, to because it takes a lot of determination to stay committed to a country and a sport that is not kind to you, that is telling you every single day you don't belong. Like,
Yeah.
you win a race and you get choked out. Like,
Yeah, and that's just one of the things. People would throw nails and ice bucket on him and things like that.
yeah.
All things said and done, though, you read in his autobiography that he was still, like you said, he was so to some extent happy about his life and what he was able to accomplish in the midst of great adversity
Absolutely.
and virulent violence sometimes.
Absolutely.
So he was inducted after he passed away. Years later, he was inducted in the United States Bicycle Hall of Fame. And more recently, there's a push in the House of Representatives, in Congress, to there's a bill that was actually a bipartisan bill that was filed by a gentleman in Chicago, Jonathan Jackson. He's a congressman, Jonathan Jackson. They filed a bill to recognize Major Taylor posthumous Congressional Gold Medal. It's right now making its way, to the Senate. So they want to give him a posthumous Congressional Gold Medal, which is pretty much the highest civilian honor that
Yeah.
anyone can get in this country. So apart from that, there is at least 80 Major Taylor cycling club across the world. So there have been a resurgence of interest in the story of Major Taylor. So yes, he had a difficult last days, but his legacy, it's ever growing.
It is.
It's ever growing, and again, for me, really, beyond the fact that he was an incredible athlete, physically, he was a man of character. And you mentioned his faith. There's so much information that I'm skimming over here.
No, but you can't, because we only have an hour.
I
Like,
know.
there's no
we
way.
could. I'm skimming over here.
It's okay. Like,
Yeah,
I have so much information that I want to ask you
Yeah.
that is going to be in the film, but we can't. We have an hour.
Yeah.
So,
And that's always the difficulty, right? Like for
Yeah.
me, even as a documentary filmmaker, I'm trying to make a 90-minute film.
yeah.
And I'm still challenged with what should I cut out? What should I leave in? And there's a lot of things I want to talk about, but I don't have the time to do so. I guess I'm hoping that when we do things like this, like podcasts and films, that people will not only stick on that. I hope this will be opportunity to spark interest into people to go and make their own research. Because I'm sure that if anyone that is interested in this story were to go and make their own research, they will find so much about
There is.
this story. And there is so much about this story to find out. I don't believe that we can cover all of it, even in a 90-minute film.
Can't.
However, it's always good to talk and spread the word about what we're doing.
No, absolutely. There is a lot of stories out there about him. There's a lot of op-ed pieces and opinions. It's always interesting to read, what folks thought his motivations were. They're not fact, by the way. They're just op-ed pieces, like people giving their opinion. But no, there's a lot of information out there. I think there's a lot more available information now.
Yeah.
And like in places like Worcester and Chicago, like anywhere that he had like a little foothold, they're so proud of him now, right? So everybody wants to be the premier place to have info about Major Taylor, but there is opportunity for us to learn about him. So when will your film come out, and how can folks access it and all of that? Let us know how we can,
So right now we do have a website. It's www.worcesterwhirlwind.com. And you can find, information about the film. We have been able so far to produce a concept trailer that is available to watch on the website and on YouTube. We are now raising money actually to make the film. budget for this film is $1.25 million. It's a little bit of money, consider where I am living, but for the vision that we have, it's pretty much nothing. Because if I was to get that budget, if I was to produce that film with a production company from Hollywood or some other places, that budget would probably be 3 times. And really, I want people to understand that I could have just stick with interviews, narration, and archive. I don't know if you are familiar. This gentleman, Ken Burn, that is very popular in doing that kind of type of documentary where you just edit pictures, a photograph, and interview, talking head, and narration. But because I wanted this story to reach a different demographic, because I also want to mention that there's just a certain demographic that watch that kind of film. Films that are just made with talking head and archives. And it's usually the older demographic. For me, this story has the potential of inspiring younger generation. And when I was thinking about how can I bring that story and package it for the younger generation, I thought about recreation. It's a documentary, which means we are working so hard to stick with what is historically and culturally accurate. We only talk about what happened and that is documented. We don't get into speculation or fiction. However, we are doing a lot of recreation. So that means we are using actors, we are using set, and like you will see Hollywood production doing, but all those recreation, again, are rooted into a lot of research. It's not just writers sitting down at a table and creating an event that never happened. Like those events, and it's very hard to recreate event that happened that people know about. Because if you don't do it right, people will tell you, hey, this did not happen. What bicycle is he using?
Has to be accurate.
What is the clothing made of?
Yes, it can get tricky.
It can get very tricky.
Anything wasn't. I mean, a little off topic, but I think it was Game of Thrones. So I never watched Game of Thrones, but I think didn't they leave like a Starbucks cup in one of the scenes? And folks went nuts.
There are people out there that will go crazy. They will forget the whole story. Like if you use the wrong handlebar or the wrong shoes or the wrong lace, they will forget about the whole story and just focus on that lace that like what is that lace doing there? And you're trying to be like, hey, this is about a great story. Lace is not very much important. They are like, no. You messed up the story.
You did.
So it's very challenging to recreate anything that is more than 100 years old and do it right. So it's very expensive because you have to get the right bicycle. The bicycle they used back then, they still look like what we have today, but they are not the same. The clothing, the velodromes, for example, where these races were happening. Worcester used to have a velodrome. It was called the Coliseum. It was on Shrewsbury Street. But we don't have those velodromes anymore. So we have to recreate those things and sometimes build it. The costume, the music, the way people spoke. It could have been easy on me to just, like I said, do archives and talking head and narration and get it done. I can do that pretty quick. But when I was really thinking about my target and the impact I want to have with the film, I thought that recreation would draw a whole different demographic, a younger demographic, which it is, because we have a trailer concept, and that allows us to experiment with the crowd, what they like and what they don't like. And so many people have been telling us and giving us feedback based on the trailer concept that we have. And we can see that, yes, the older demographic are interested in the story, but the younger people are more interested in the recreation part of it. They are not so much interested in the lecture.
I mean, this is the TikTok generation. They have like a 30-second span. They're not going to sit down for a 90-minute lecture, unfortunate. But that's wonderful. Well, I really want to wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
In doing that, I can't wait to, see the full product and, listen to, see the recreation. I'll be looking out for those laces because, I want to make sure you get the laces right.
I know.
Right?
Yeah, those laces are expensive.
Listen.
You wouldn't believe. We have to order some of them like from other countries,
Yeah,
because we can't find them anyway.
It
As
doesn't exist
small as it
anymore.
is, they cost a lot of money.
No, of course they do, because again, it doesn't exist. You're using like a material that they stopped making in 1900, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, and I think, when I always say this to people, like, when somebody is creative, like you're an artist, or, you have any skill set, right? You put a lot of work into it. Like, so people get the finished product, and of course they complain and they criticize, but they're like, if you only knew what I went through to get to this.
I know.
This is 5 years and
know.
phone calls and emails, and you're focusing on the list, but okay. But
I know.
we have to.
But it's part of the journey.
It
You
is.
can't just want the accolade. You can't just want the good review. As an artist and a filmmaker, whatever you do in life, if you want to take the good reviews, you also have to take the bad reviews. You're either going to be, at least that's how I look at it. If I'm going to open myself to what people are saying and take that, I want to take the good and the bad.
No,
you don't just want to focus on what people are saying good and be like, hey, and discredit what they are saying bad. It's either you do that or you don't take the good or bad critique at all and you just don't even worry about it. Or if you have to open yourself to the critics, you have to open yourself to the good and the bad critics. So that's usually where I'm trying to find my balance. There are times where I'm like, I don't want to hear it. And there are times like, okay, what are you talking about?
Okay,
So,
it helps us improve. It helps us improve our craft when somebody, give feedback. I always think of it, especially if it's coming from a place of love or educational. Like people are hating just for hating is a different story. But no, we do have to get feedback because, again, we are constantly looking at ways to elevate our craft, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So excited about the movie. So I know that you are a filmmaker, so that's not the only thing that you have done. But there's any other? You mentioned the Hoodstock. I know that, and I read I know a little bit of your story. So what other films that are out there or in the works for you?
Well, there is a lot of project on YouTube. I'm thinking right now about a project that I did right before the Woodstock thing. It was about a woman living with dementia, an artist living with dementia. An incredible project. It's called Miriam Living with Dementia. It's on YouTube. An incredible story as well. The lady passed away at this point, but the story is out there. I did a few other local projects with artists, documentary style. Worcester Got African Talent with a few artists locally where they talk about their stories and things like that. That's the most recent project that are available online.
And you have won some award. I know you don't like to talk about yourself, but you've won a few awards. Let's tell the folks.
Well, the one that is pretty local is, I guess we can call it an award, is a Worcester Fellowship. Was pretty much a grant at that time, 2020, and that was related to the Major Taylor project I was working on. My work, actually, I also did a short film on transgender life in America, which is now, it's not online, but we went to a few festivals, including Flix Festival. That is pretty much the biggest LGBTQ film festival in the world. The project on Miriam was selected to screen at the Neuroscience Film Fest in Los Angeles when the project came out. And the organization doing that festival is the biggest neuroscience association in the world. So I have not won big things. And honestly, those things are good. But for me, really, I feel like what is more important is to be able to focus on my craft and tell the stories that I want to tell without too much pressure. Because sometimes there is, especially on this documentary on Major Taylor, there are days where I feel a lot of pressure, like pressure from founders who want me to tell the story a certain way, pressures from the team, which I can take, but I'm hoping that I can get to a point where I can just create what I want to create and not have to worry about the prize and how people will look at it. That makes me, the feeling of being an independent filmmaker and creating the things that I want to create and telling the story that I want to tell, for me is much more important than any award that I can get. Because it doesn't matter if I get an Oscar or an Emmy Award. If I'm not happy with the work that I'm putting out there, I will be a very sad person. However, if I'm happy with the work that I'm putting out there and I don't get those accolades, I don't care. Really, it doesn't affect me. So I think my mental health and creating things that I can be happy about is much more important than, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the recognition is not good,
Yeah.
but you don't want any recognition that will put too much stress on you or pressure on you, or, you know, because sometimes it does. When that comes, people start asking you, are you going to, you know, create, what are you doing next? You know, is it going to be the same thing or something else? I mean, people have all kind of expectations, and which is okay. People are entitled to have their own expectations, but I'm just hoping that I can create a wall of mine where I can be happy. I don't like using that word because happiness means a lot of things, but I want to be happy with what I'm putting out there, even if people don't like it.
No, I love that. No, that is so important. I did a recent podcast episode where I talked about like awards and accolades are great, but if you don't win anything, don't stop learning, don't stop growing, don't stop perfecting your craft and putting it out there, because some folks might not recognize what you do and give you the Oscar or the Emmy or the Golden Globe. But if you are happy with the work that you're putting out, that's more
That
important
matter a
than
lot.
winning an award and it's not who you are. You know, like you win and like the work just gotten so diluted because you were trying to cater and pander to the public. So you put on something you're not proud of, but you got an award and it's killing you inside.
Yeah.
So your mental health you're absolutely correct, is a lot more important than the award. So I wish that for you. I wish that you're able to have this peace and the space
Amen.
and the freedom and the financial backing.
Absolutely, yeah.
To create something that you're proud of, to put out something about Major Taylor in whatever project you choose to do in the future, that you're able to create something that you're proud of. And that in itself, I believe, is truly its own rewards.
Well, thank you very much, Suzanne. Thank you to your audience watching this podcast. I was happy to come on here. Thank you to your producer. And, you know, to yourself as a creative, keep doing what you're doing. You know, that's what matters. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Well, no, I appreciate learning, and no, keep doing what you're doing, you know, from one creative to another. I appreciate it. I'm so glad that I was able to have you on the show during Black History Month to spotlight, you know, what you're doing, because it's fantastic. So I'm just going to ask you for 30 seconds. If you could just encourage, you know, young Black filmmakers that are out there that are looking to start, like one bit of advice you would give to them, you know, because they might just be at the verge of giving up. One bit of advice you would give to them.
I would say, do you. Be kind and don't be always nice.
Nice is different from kind.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Once again, thank you to my loyal viewers, my producer, you know, my sponsor for everyone, and thank you to my fantastic guest, the amazing storyteller, Cyrille Vincent. Cyrille Vincent, please go check him out on YouTube. Follow him on social media. We want to make sure that we're making some noise about the stories that he's telling, because you know, my motto is your story deserves to be told, and if anybody deserves their story, Major Taylor deserves his story to be told. So thank you again for appearing. And best of luck. And until next time, let's say goodbye to the audience.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Talk soon.
Talk
See you
soon.
soon.